Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff No One Ever Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And we're a little bit late with this specific episode edition, but we wanted to do the award-winning movie Sinners. And because it was just released last year, you know it has to be a Saturday spoiler. So not a feminist movie necessarily. It is a feminist movie in retrospective, like we're doing this as a movie. But it's a spoiler Saturday, so obviously lots of spoilers ahead. Lots of spoilers. And if you've been fortunate enough to not have been spoiled already or know anything about it, that's the best way to go into a movie. So you should stop and watch first and then come back. But yeah, spoiler alert, I will say I knew nothing about this movie until I watched it. So when I realized it had vampires in it, I was like, wait, what? Did you know much before you started watching it?
Yeah, I did.
Oh, you did. You did get spoiled on it.
Yeah. I find I'm really having a hard time avoiding spoilers these days, and I'm not entirely sure. I think it's my algorithm, but yes, I did know that there were vampires involved. I knew that music was a key element, and I knew that it had a kind of gothic vibe.
Southern Gothic, and I've talked about how much I love Southern Gothic, and this is absolutely the epitome of Southern Gothic horror. So hello. Also, content warning, we do talk about death, racism, a lot of hate speech. I don't think we'd say any of those things, but, it's obviously in there. This is going to be taking place in 1932, I believe. So lots of racism in that point in time. We are not going to talk a lot about the controversies that are occurring at this point. It is February 26th, 2026, if you're wondering, as we're recording this. But instead, we're going to talk about what we thought was really significant about this movie and some of the things that I was very fascinated by in this movie as well. So go ahead and put that there. And yeah, this episode is going to be a bit different because this movie is so layered. So not only do we want to talk about the movie plot and ending, but the history, the many firsts that the movie was able to have, and then some of the themes around it as well. So once again, we are currently in award season. As a part of the Writers Union, we get a lot of emails and screeners.
Yes, we do.
This is one of those. This was one of those movies.
My mom is so impressed by that. Even though it's honestly, it's great, but it's not that impressive. But she thinks it's the coolest thing.
Well, again, I've been able to attend a screening with a Q&A with one of the stars for one of the movies because of that opportunity. So, not this movie specifically, but Tiana Taylor was a blast to see.
Mm-hmm.
And that means the movie world is buzzing with a lot of whispers and controversies, especially around Sinners. Unfortunately, it is in the middle of, in that middle of the whispers and conversations. I know things have arisen with the BAFTAs, which should have been in time for celebration, but things kind of overshadowed it. But it doesn't negate the fact that they are winning and getting the accolades they truly deserve. We know when it was first released and talks of awards were coming around, there was a lot of dispute about whether it's worth as much as these other movies. And we've had a lot of people coming out with support for Ryan Coogler and this movie in general, and why it does deserve to be at the top of the list for the movies released of 2025. And I agree with that statement. And this is a phenomenal movie. It was unique. It was a different take. I loved it. Currently, the film has 424 nominations, including Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best Supporting Actor and Actress, Best Score and Song, Production, Screenplay, and this is with the Academy Awards. They, again, have so much more. It currently has 200 wins, including the recent BAFTA for Best Supporting Actress and Best Original Screenplay, Critics' Choice Award for Best Young Performer, and also Original Screenplay. I think 424 is a lot. And some of the firsts we want to celebrate include the fact that they're the first film in history to earn 16 Oscar nominations. Blew out the water, including One Battle After Another, which has 13 nominations. So, and this is first also for a woman of color to be nominated for Best Cinematography, and that is Autumn Cheyenne Durald Archipel, which is phenomenal in itself. Did you have more information on? You and I talked about this film because she was such a big part of this movie, and she had just made history with that nomination.
Yeah. So when we were talking about what movie we wanted to do for this month, I really wanted to talk about this one because of that historic nomination, but because I believe this is also historic in terms of how many women have been nominated in technical fields. That is not, unfortunately, that's kind of rare, but that I don't think she's the only one. I believe there's some other women in the field, which is great. Like, that is an amazing thing, as sad as it is that it took this
Right.
long. But it just felt so important. And when you get a movie that gets this many accolades, that gets this much attention, you have to think about the cinematography of the person who put it together and why it worked so well. And yes, it was a woman. It was a woman of color. Like that. I just think that's so important. And we should look to that and think about why that is.
And she did a phenomenal job. Some of the
Yes.
scenes, again, are just breathtaking.
Yes.
And so memorable, so memorable. And there are so many articles out there talking about her process with Coogler and how they had to stage everything and how they had to pre-plan everything, how long it took to get it done, the like procedures, and the actors talking about like coming back to see it and being like, oh my God, that is amazing. Like that level of professionalism, that level of imagination in itself to come to the screen is beautiful. And they also had a first for Ryan Coogler's ownership deal he made with Warner Brothers. And it made huge news. Like people were like, oh, damn, that's going to be huge for the industry and the future of how negotiations go, because it has given Coogler the rights to the movie after 25 years. Again, it is not done with directors in general to have ownership of their work. And this allows for him to receive royalties and all of the money after the fact, which typically go to the production studio. And that is an important conversation we need to be having about who is getting the money when it continues to blow up, when you have the anniversaries and when you have the conversation. Because we've definitely watched a lot of classics and know they put a lot of time in celebrating these films. Lord of the Rings could be a big example, and re-releasing and re-showing, and who is making that money?
Yep.
Not the directors.
Yep.
So we love to see it. Like people were gagged, essentially, couldn't imagine that he actually asked for that, and not only asked for that, but he got that. And it's really important to see that the right people get the ownership and get the accolades that they deserve and the credit. And this is, again, and get paid. So kudos. And I will say, I'm interested in how that will change the future of negotiations right now. And I think a lot of people are in that same, especially as successful as it is. Love that. So with all of that, we're going to jump into the plot. Again, spoilers ahead. If you haven't watched it, go watch it. So it's 1932, set in the Jim Crow South, where we meet young Sammy, played by Miles Caton, in his acting debut. He's a youngin' that they saw on social media singing, and he's got an incredible voice, y'all, and playing, or also known as Preacher Boy. He's working out in the cotton fields, setting his daily quota. Ready to start the day, he runs home and tries to find his beloved guitar, which is a 1932 Dobro Cyclops resonator guitar. So, like, that thing was pristine, and I'm sure it took so long for them to get that. And for the composer, Ludwig Göransson, who is essentially Coogler's partner in all of the movies, he was bound and determined to find that so he could get that haunting music that he knows is so part of the blues. So very important. Beautiful instrument. Beautiful. It was a guitar that was given to him by his cousins, the Smokestack twins. After realizing that his father, the preacher, had taken it, he goes to the church and is trying to get it from his father, who warns him that, quote, if you keep dancing with the devil, one day he'll be following you home. Which I was like, foreshadowing, which if you know anything about Southern Gothic, you have to have all the foreshadowing, all of it, obviously.
Yes.
Um, so we now meet the Smokestack twins, Elijah Smoke and Elias Stack Moore, both played by Michael B. Jordan, who have left Chicago to return home. They've come back with supplies and a plan to open a new juke joint, recruiting local legend Delta Slim, played by Delroy Lindo, who actually is also winning some awards out there. They also recruit Cornbread, a friend, as the bouncer, played by Omar Benson Miller. Anney, who is played by award-winning Wanmi Masoku, who has been a part of the Marvel world, and she was a part of the Lovecraft Country, which also has the same like Southern Gothic feel that I love, and horror, obviously. And she plays the estranged wife of Smoke and hoodoo practitioner. Important. They got supplies from the neighborhood shopkeepers Bo and Grace Chow, who are played by Lee Jun Lee and Yao, who are two of the Chinese actors that have been a part of this and have made pretty big headlines in itself. So we learn throughout the movie that Smoke and Anney are estranged due to the grief of losing their baby and Smoke's decision to go with Stack. They live a pretty hard lifestyle, y'all. We kind of know that they've been up to some things. We don't know what. They've got quite a reputation. You don't mess with these boys. You don't mess with these boys. I believe there's a legend that we do find out that may or may not have happened, because we find out also Stack likes to tell some tall tales, but they could have killed their father, who was abusive and was hurting them, as well as so many other things. So, and I think the legend of them are pretty true, as he immediately shoots people that try to rob him. He also pays for their healing, for their hospital bills.
Yeah.
So, you know.
Yeah.
Great. But between Anney and Smoke, they obviously still miss each other. And she talks about continuing to protect him while he's out in the world through her practices. So, and she's a great character. So at the same time, we see a stranger who is obviously injured rush to a home begging for help and refuge from people who are hunting him. It turns out the people are KKK members who were willing to trust this man since he was white and had gold. After the hunters turns out to be Native Indigenous peoples, the Choctaw Nation specifically, try to find this person. He tried to warn the couple, don't invite him in. Don't invite him in. And, you know, God protect you. May your God protect you if you do. They leave, and then we see that the stranger has turned them all into vampires, because he is a vampire. Vampire.
Needs to be invited in.
Got to be invited in.
Mm-hmm.
So as Club Juke, which is what Smoke and Stack have put together, comes together, we see the party growing with good music and good dancing throughout the night. Then during this time, we get to see the historical look of music and different cultures coming together. The scene is incredible. We're going to talk a little bit more about the scene later, but they do a moment of which it does transcend and call out to the spirits out there, because it moves through the years and times, future and past, and coming together through the music that preacher boy Sammy is making. So we also have Mary, which I didn't mention before, played by Haley Steinfeld, who is Stack's ex-girlfriend, who is also white passing. So her grandfather was half black. And so she is able to pass off as white. And Stack had wanted her to marry to a white man and live comfortably, but she was in love with Stack. So many things. Her mother had just died, who had helped raise Stack of Smoke, and that's why she was in the town. And decided she needed to go check this place out and see what Stack was up to specifically. And she stirs a lot of things up. Though a lot of people didn't recognize her, when they do, they literally welcome her back with open arms and let her invite her into the party. So as the party continues, Sammy inadvertently gets the attention of the vampire, who we learn is named Remick, played by Jack O'Connell, and his now new family, and putting that in quotes, Bert and Joan, who are now vampires. As vampires, again, they cannot get in without an invitation, so after being turned away, they stay near, playing their own music and waiting and waiting. So it is very bluegrass sounding, but later on, we have a wonderful Irish folk song by Remick, and then it latches onto the entirety of the crew. Barry decides to go and investigate whether or not they are coming to make trouble, because, Stack and Smoke are worried that maybe they're from Chicago coming to plot revenge, because some things, again, have been implied that they went after some of the gangsters of Chicago. And if you know that era, you don't want to be messing with them. So she goes and tries to figure out what's going on, but then it turns out she ends up being killed and turned as well. And then chaos ensues. Yes. After Mary gets an invite back inside the club after the fact, she then kills Stack, which causes the evening to turn very quickly. After being shot several times by Smoke, Mary runs out the club, declaring that they would kill them all. Annie quickly, and I love this part, I'm not gonna lie, assesses the situation and tries to get Smoke to put Stack outside of the club because she knew something was wrong. This is not right. Later, we find that Cornbread has been turned as well because he decided he needed to go into the woods and And Grace has also convinced Bo to go start the car because she knew something was wrong and he didn't come back either. So there are things happening. And Annie declares what has to be done. She's like, all right, this is what's happening because Cornbread has come back and kind of revealed the fact that, yes, things are not all right. We have Stack coming back to life and very angry about it and runs out the club as well because they figured out things are not good. He is not okay. They are not okay. With that, Annie declares that they have to get garlic and steaks and make sure that they're not inviting anybody inside, that these are the rules of who they are. And she'd gone through different lores of what they could be and says that the vampires are the worst of the worst, essentially, that they are cursed to live with no sun, not never seeing the sun again, and never being able to reunite with those in the afterlife. And with that, she has predicted her own death that night and tells Smoke, makes him promise that he will kill her before she turns so that she can be with their baby. And she's like, I have someone waiting for me on the other side, and so do you. Hearts. And with a controversial moment in which Grace loses all hope after being essentially rage baited by her now dead husband / vampire husband and those around, with them threatening their daughter, Lisa. She yells an invite in, causing all of the vampires to storm into the club. We see a long battle and violence, and we see that Sammy is able to, in the end, escape after so much. And by the way, I forgot that Remick was focused on Sammy and even said, if you send me him, we will let you all live. Just give me Sammy. It's his music that I'm drawn to, as his father had said. And of course, Smoke was not having that. In the end, after a long battle, Smoke was able to save Sammy. Unfortunately, no one else. And Sammy is able to escape. At the same time, Smoke has destroyed the vampires, including the later Remick. And we also learn, as a part of the story, that the person who sold the mill to the Smokestack brothers was the Grand Dragon of the KKK and had intended to come back and slaughter everyone at the club with his crew. But Smoke was ready and able to take everyone out before his death. And as it ends, we see him being able to reunite with Annie and their baby. Very sweet scene. Okay, and then we have an aftermath, and after the credit scene, I guess, after a couple of credit scenes, in which we find Sammy all grown up and successful in his music career, played by legendary Bobby Guy. Like, he is a legendary blues and folk singer. So they were like, come be a part of this. And I loved they were able to give him his flowers. And there we see Stack and Mary, who is not aged, who were able to survive that night because essentially Smoke was like, I'll let you live. Just leave Sammy alone. Let Sammy be. And they kept that promise. They celebrated together, in which he talks with Sammy. And Sammy makes a statement about, like, that was the best night up until everything went bad. And even though he had nightmares about that night, it was still the best night of his life. And Stack agrees, saying, yes, for a minute, we were free. Such a good scene. And then, end scene. Y'all. Just like any Southern Gothic novel, to me, a good one leaves you feeling perplexed. Like, there's this complex feeling of, like, okay, it's bad, but it's not bad. Like, all these tragedies have to happen and we grow from them. but it's still not necessarily a satisfying ending, but a satisfying ending. You know?
Yeah.
It's that feeling. It's that lingering, the haunting that remains.
Yeah.
Like, it's not happy, but it's not completely depressing.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's so much of this movie has that kind of feel. It has a feel. And a big part of that feel is, we made this beautiful thing and it was the best night. And we were free for that night. And then this is what happened.
Right.
But kind of remembering what it was before that. And then I think that having that closing, because it's a post-credit scene, everybody.
Yeah. You don't know exactly.
Is really bittersweet because it's, you've aged in this instance. You've aged, but you see these people who were in your life who have not, and who have become vampires, and who come to see you, and just having that difference of experience and that memory of that night where your lives just went in completely different ways. Yeah, I just think that's a really powerful message of how you don't know where your life is going to take you, and you don't know, like, the people in your life.
Right.
You don't know what's going to happen to them either. And for Sammy, I mean, because he was physically really wounded, but for him to continue and to deal with what happened on that night, that was both a wonderful night and then a really horrific night.
Right. There's so much to that, like, and then that's kind of that level of today, just about like joy. And we've talked about the Black community really having to search for some of the joy, especially at times where they feel like they're the most persecuted because they were, or oppressed. And during this time is that time. So having to measure the tragedies at the same time, finding their joys where they can, it's like that inner layer of the constant battle that happens. And we can see that in so much, like all this darkness. There's so much darkness right now in life, and so much bad news and so many bad things, but trying to find those joyous moments too, and kind of like admitting to those joyous moments, but understanding they're still surrounded by trauma and struggle as well. I think there's so much in that, but this movie again leaves that haunting so thoroughly that it's almost jarring to me, because when I first watched it, I was like, oh, and then I watched it again. I was like, oh, yeah, okay, and then one of the big things that I think push and pull with the jarring movement is the music. And this was a big theme of the movie, is a big part of the movie. It's another character and driver of the movie. And I think it's something that I focused a lot on this because the music in itself like can do a whole change in the mood, in the context of all of that. And I wanted to go to this NPR article where they talk about his blues rap and all of this. And they write, the film, set in 1932, revolves primarily around ideas of Black spirituality and the music's place in Mississippi Delta communities' evaluation of righteous and iniquity. There are references to Black Christianity and hoodoo, piety and profanity, and music foundation as a turn toward both salvation and damnation. The agnostic but faith-appreciating narrative plays into this duality from its opening seconds. Quote, "There are legends of people born with the gift of making music so true, it can pierce the veil between life and death, conjuring spirits from the past and the future," a voiceover explains. This gift can bring healing to their communities, but it also attracts evil. And having Anney being the voiceover for that was perfect because she understands, obviously, on a deeper level, what this looks like and the flashes of what we see. And I think, and we're going to talk a little bit very briefly about the religion aspect because it's a big conversation. And I think I am and I'm not equipped to have this conversation because, especially when you talk about the Black community, the enslaved, and the colonization, what with Christianity and what we've seen in Christianity and the Christian missions and all of these aspects, especially when it comes to the damaging and the overall oppressing of other cultures through what they would call conversion or mission. So there's just a depth of level, but the fact that they do have this back and forth about what does this music look like. So when we looked at blues when it first came out, it was kind of looked down upon because having blues meant that you didn't trust Jesus. And though, Jesus was not a thing until they were brought to the US at the time, blues have always been. So trying to mix those two together is that deeper conversation, the profound look at culture. And exactly as they did, they brought that culture here and opened the world to this beauty that is the blues. And the NPR article specifically talks about the blues, and they say, you can read the through line of Sinners in which Sammy, the lone human survivor of a remixed vampire horde, abandons his father's church to play blues in Chicago despite the horrors it brings to the juke, as not just a rejection of religiosity, but an embrace of the blues sorcery in its continuance as a sort of cultural necessity, honoring the sacrifices that sustain the music. So again, you have that overlapping of music. And if you know, I think in the US, it's hard not to know the level of depth when it comes to music and what that brings. And then also the level of depth of music in religion. Like, music sways you. Music makes you feel things, and it is used that way, whether it's those moments that you need to be released. So you sing a praise song because you have to be thankful, or you need to be thankful, or whether it's that moment of like you use it as a prayer, which we've known that's a huge conversation. You use it as a communication. Like you see people doing praise songs with their hands out, with their face lifted because they really emote through song is kind of that same level. We understand that the history of the blues, the history of a lot of Black folk music had to do about seeking freedom and being able to communicate with each other as well. So there's just overall being, and then that Sammy has taken that route, that he came for like salvation because he made it, but then he realized that's not his route. And he goes to Chicago in the end and becomes successful and has that taste of success.
Yeah. And again, I hope any listener who is listening to this, you've already seen the movie, but it opens with kind of a flashback. It opens with Sammy covered in blood, injured, holding a wrecked guitar. And then we go back from there to see how that happened, how that occurred. But I do think when we're having conversations about the history of the United States and the history of the Black community in the United States and music and Black contributions to music in the United States, we can't remove the pain, the damage, you did all of this work and then it just got ripped away from you. And so I think that is because when they had this kind of beautiful moment in what felt like a very church-like environment to me, just like the lighting and the like wood panels and all of that stuff, that it got infiltrated because of this invitation by the vampires. Like somebody let them in, and for Sammy to show up with all of these injuries and this broken guitar, it's really powerful imagery. And yeah, I mean, the music is so key throughout the whole thing.
Oh, and y'all, one of the most haunting scenes is behind the song I Lie to You, sung by Miles Kitten, and it's performed, and it becomes such an interlacing so many ideals and cultural aspects. There's a lot to be seen. Like, I feel like I've probably watched this movie now about 6 times. I have not seen that scene fully. Like, I have not watched that scene fully, even though I've seen it that many times. The technicality in production, choreography, layout, breakdown, and historical context is magnificent. It is, again, breathtaking. It is almost overwhelming because there's so much to try to dive into. Actually, this is from an entertainmentweekly.com article, and they write, "For Sinners, a movie that in many ways is about the transcendence of music, he being Ryan Coogler, wanted a cinematic representation of that experience, especially how the experience of an artist who hails from a particular community comes with a particular point of view that the audience fully understands. They're participating in this performance in a way that becomes a feedback loop," the filmmaker explains. "And if you've ever been present in an experience like that, it feels euphoric. For a moment, you feel so present that you almost feel immortal." It is. Like, it's this context of like, okay, this begat this begat this. So if you know anything about the Bible, like, it's just this continuation of a lineage that is a loop that it becomes. And from what I've read, they had to wait to the last day of filming to set the fire scene because they set the thing on fire. Literally. And again, it's magical and haunting because it looks so unique. Like, what you see is the perspective of the vampire remake of the end, because he's seeing this. He is seeing the future and like as well, and he sees the draw. That's how it's drawn in through that fire. And back to that article, they say they somehow locked into the very spirit that drives the scene. For these characters that had the fing rotten luck of being born in 1932 Mississippi, that's where their adulthood would be experienced, Kugler says. To have their transcendent experience where they get to spend time with the people that came before them and the people that came after them. Even if they don't know it, they feel it. Again, that connection, that music, that art, it connects people. And I think like he does a great job in bringing that with having Buddy Guy play that character in Age, like bringing this legend together with another legend in the making, Miles Caton as well as Buddy Guy. Like there's this level of loop that we're seeing where the before and the after and the beginning, like all these things, we see that loop, that layer of coming together that I think he does a great job. And also, again, giving flowers where it's due. We've talked about trying to give flowers before, like it's too late. And this is kind of that level. Like Kugler is a king of doing this. I feel like he does such a great job in making sure he brings people in that deserve to be there. And he makes sure to give the accolades and give the flowers and give them their credit way before. And again, just to see that in the cinematic feel in such a way that was unexpected. Like, it was unexpected. The way it was perfectly immersed, the way it was perfectly blended. I was like, oh. And even with that adding, like, the Chinese culture in representing the Chow characters and how their backgrounds came into it as well, and, like, who they were in coming into this place. Everything about that with a cinematic layer, also historical layer, is such a unique perspective and so new in this industry to me.
Yeah. I mean, it feels very unique because it does kind of turn into a vampire movie. It feels like it turns into a vampire movie probably 2/3 of the way through. And then before that, it's got, your Southern Gothic, something's going on, all of this. But then this vampire element comes in, and you do have all of these threads of what was going on in society at the time and how I really appreciate when creators, writers, directors can hone in onto who characters are quickly without like too much dialogue. And I feel like they did that really well, of who these characters are, what their motivations are, and then vampires show up, and how does that change things? Or does it change things?
Correct. Oh, there's so much. I did have a quote from Ryan Coogler when he spoke with IndieWire's podcast, Filmmaker Toolkit, about that scene. And he said, it's about that feeling of being at a live performance of any art. When you see a virtuoso perform and you're in the presence of a group of people who also appreciate the art form, but also know the context of it and know where the artist is coming from. They relate to what's being portrayed, and the feeling of euphoria becomes like a storm system. It's feedback happening and rippling. I've had a few of those moments in my life, and you feel immortal, like you're outside of space and time for a moment, like there's another presence there with you. And it's true, like if you like really get into a song, where you really feel that song, that emotion, it makes you cry, it makes you chills, like you're in that moment. There's something that does feel like it stands still in that moment of like they're talking to you. Of course, this is kind of like when we talk about fandoms being developed and having like this deeper relationship because you really feel that. This is a little different in that context, but like understanding that level of music, and understanding the depth of blues and music on a whole different level. And as Delta Slim says in the scene, he says, blues, it wasn't forced on us like that religion. No, son. We brought this with us from home. It's magic. What we do is sacred and big. And this is going back to the origins of blues and how significant and important it is. And during a time where I think the Black community was trying to find their place in the U.S., especially in a place that isn't accepting of them, like finding their belief systems, finding their religious systems, and then also remembering their culture, like that level, like remembering the blues as it was, something that they brought with them that's inside of them, the music that's like obviously penetrates everything today. It is that level, like it's that magic, as sacred, is big. And I did want to throw in here about the Irish music, folk music, because we have that moment, like my partner and I, he is Irish, but I do like the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 moment in that song. That's all I know. That's all I know. I know, I was like, but it is really, it tickles my ear in a nice way. But it's like interesting to note that just like in a lot of this, in this context of history, the Irish folk music and the blues did have a lot of crossover and collaboration. And it was influential to bluegrass as we know it as well, like the intertwining the two. And like rhythmic, I really do feel like there's all this level of context and conversation, but the Irish really were coming into a place of trying to find their own place in a nation that was like, nah, we don't want you either. Type of context.
At the time, absolutely.
Yeah, at that point in time, and in this level of growing and bringing their own culture and their folk music and what that meant for them in that level. And so he represents that, and he puts it well in like, I'm not like them. I'm not like these racist white people. Oh no, I'm Irish. Like that depth of that, I did appreciate that. And yeah, Jack O'Connell did a phenomenal job in the song and representing that, as well as the characters who played Joan and Bert. They both are musicians. And so they were brought in for their talents and that, and they did a beautiful job. I love that first folk song they come in about the picking Robin clean.
Yeah. I don't think we can oversay the music is so good.
Yes.
In this movie. And it's both, it takes you back to a place and time, but it's also haunting in a lot of ways. Yeah. And when the vampires are playing these songs, they're so good, but it's creepy. It's creepy.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And they lay it out that way, too. And with that, we want to jump into about the cultural differences in racism and the dynamics that we don't often see or talk about, or sometimes we do talk about, like all these things, it being during the Jim Crow era. And I did get a lot of this from historycan'thide.com, because he went in and had a whole thing about the historical context behind the movie, and I thought they were really great. But he explains the Jim Crow era as this. Jim Crow refers to the system of laws and customs enforcing racial segregation in the American South from the end of Reconstruction, 1877, until the Civil Rights Movement in 1950s to the 1960s. Now, that is something that the schools were teaching. I did learn about that. in my time. So I hope it's still happening. Oh, Lord have mercy. But it does talk about this level of segregation, the legal segregation that we saw, and I don't know if it started to play out again or whatever, in that time and what that meant. You could see it in the scenes of them going shopping. And I know there's been a lot of conversation, a little more context of the Chinese shop owners in the South, as well as who was customers. But the fact that they had two separate stores, one was for the white customers and one for the non-white customers, typically Black customers. And it was an interesting look because it was right across the street from each other. So kind of like that whole saying of across the railroad track type of level of understanding that this is their side, this is our side. Again, that Jim Crow segregation level. And then also in which I believe it was at Smoke who said they came back to the South because it's no different in Chicago. It was just instead of plantations, skyscrapers, large buildings there. He's like, it's better to be with the devil you know. In that reference, and knowing that you know what to expect in the South versus what they expect in what they say is in the North. And we've kind of talked about that before when, sure, it was better to technically, sure, they were the North and fought for the North, but that did not mean that they had respect or they had the actual equality that you would think they would as they played it out in like the abolitionist movements. So that was that big conversation in that understanding of what this Jim Crow did for the entirety of the United States, who was seen as equal, who was seen as being able to be successful and how to be successful. And so it was interesting to see both of that. And then also speaking about the Chinese American in the South, it's been interesting because it's been popping up because of centers. Even though the history's out there, not a lot of people knew about the Chinese community, specifically in the South, and how they kind of came over this way. And I found it funny because I've seen a few videos, have you any, where you see old Chinese people who've been in Alabama or in Mississippi, all that, having the thick Southern accent. And everybody's like, who are you? Where did you come from? And they're like, no, we've been here. This is what we know. This is the community that we know. And in this conversation, which I felt like home to me. I don't have that thick of an accent, but I definitely have an accent. Like just recently, someone said, you are not I thought you would be. Essentially telling me they thought I was going to be like white or not, definitely not Asian. But I really did think it's interesting. So going back to that historycan'thide.com, they write, Chinese immigrants began arriving in the Mississippi Delta after the Civil War, initially recruited as plantation labor to replace emancipated enslaved people. By the early 20th century, many had established grocery stores that served predominantly Black clientele, occupying a unique middle position in the racial hierarchy of the segregated South. Neither white nor Black, Chinese Americans navigated a complex social landscape after facing discrimination while simultaneously finding economic niches that allowed for a degree of autonomy. These grocery stores frequently extended credit to Black customers and became important community spaces despite the constraints of segregation. Now, I want to go ahead and put this in here because I'm a Debbie Downer. That doesn't mean they weren't racist towards Black people. I think they were, at that point, they were all together. There was a moment of like coming together. But as we've seen, there's a lot of level of prejudices that happen within the communities, the Asian Chinese communities, Asian communities with the Black communities and vice versa. In this point, though, and we've talked about this before, the Asian community has somewhat been more accepted because of the model minority myth that was created and perpetuated in order to continue to oppress Black communities more. So there's this level that we will never not talk about when in this, like, we're not going to say, oh, yay, Chinese people, yay, Chinese Americans were all okay. In this point, they were really a good community together, and we do celebrate that. But we have known and seen that white supremacy still can be a little more enticing for communities to try to reach for and step on others to get to that point. But I'd loved being able to see representation like that. I mean, the amount of Asian people who just jumped into this costume play, y'all, I've talked about this before, but the level of representation is so low that you just reach for anything, and to actually see actual representation in something as acclaimed as this, like you can't help but just fall in love.
Mm-hmm.
And love it more. I did. I also want to give a shout out to the fact that they brought in the Choctaw nations as well, and they made sure to differentiate who they were. They made sure to use native language. Like it was just for a blip. And honestly, I'm like, if Coogler wanted to make a prequel, I believe they're the
Yes.
ones. You
I agree.
know?
I agree.
Come on. Come on. That
Mm-hmm.
depth. Like it kind of the same thing as with Anney understanding, having the
Yes.
first understanding of who the vampires were.
Oh, she
That
was like,
level
let's
of
get our garlic. That was
yes.
amazing.
Yeah, no, like that's what I'm saying. Like she knew because she was already aware of that world. And I
Yeah.
believe like the native indigenous people were already aware of that world because
Yeah.
of the depth of understanding of they knew of the universe, like the dark and the light. So seeing that, I'm like, this is the prequel we want.
Yeah.
This
I
is the
agree
prequel we will want.
completely.
So this is again from the historycan'thide.com. They write, the Choctaw are one of the original indigenous people of southeastern United States, with ancestral lands throughout Mississippi, Alabama, and Louisiana. Known as sophisticated farmers, skilled craftspeople, and strategic diplomats, the Choctaw developed complex social and religious systems deeply connected to the land. In the 1830s, most Choctaw were forcibly relocated to Indian Territory, now Oklahoma, during the Trail of Tears, though some remained in Mississippi. Choctaw spiritual traditions include beliefs about soul dualism and powerful entities residing in natural features, concepts that have influenced regional folklore across racial boundaries. Again, I loved everything about this. I love that they were the guardians of the land. I need this prequel. I don't know if anybody listens to us, but we need this prequel.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic because the Choctaw, they show up and they're like, hey, that's definitely, you shouldn't invite them in, this vampire. They don't say vampire, but you should invite them in. Just don't do it. And I kind of love how they were like, it felt that they were protecting the land, like a lot of indigenous people protecting the land and protecting people. I think the prequel should be them.
Yeah. I mean, he literally says, we can take care of him now and protect you.
Yes.
Just tell us he's here or let us in type of conversation.
Yeah.
And they don't listen because they're not going to listen to, well, they said it straight, right? Like they called them, everything else but who they were. And I think like that level of understanding the land, the dimensions, that's exactly like Anney, who was in the hoodoo practice, them who are a part of the Choctaw Nation who understand the land in itself and have been there, was established there and still trying to protect even the people who would want to hurt them. Yep. Like it was an interesting level, but I love that Kugler made sure that was a part of the scene as well and allowing for their indigenous language. I loved that. I loved them. Like, yes, there you are. I think that was such a big part of why the representation and the love of those types of education, like an education in such a great way. I put this as a blip because this is definitely one of those moments where we're going to have that philosophical ideal of freedom, especially during this time, especially for the Black community, especially those who are enslaved or in times of Jim Crow. What did that look like? And they put it really well, and like they were never free.
Yeah.
Because if they were truly free, they would have these opportunities and not have to guard, not worry about whether they were going to die because they were able to celebrate, whether they were going to die or be murdered because they bought things that they had wanted, trying to survive, trying to grow as a community. It was an interesting conversation, again, with the Smokestack Twins, with Preacher Boy, trying to tell him, this is not what you think. If you want true freedom, there's an area not too far from here where they actually do have a land. Go there. It's still in the South, but they're able to be alone and and prosper. It's not in Chicago. It's not in the North. It's here. Like he talks about, if you want freedom, this is what it should look like in that level of depth. But then you also have this conversation about freedom from religion, like the secular versus the religious, like his father, like tying him down and saying, you're if you do these things, you're going to hell. that ever threat of hell, the ever threat of the devil, the ever threat of being, cast out, essentially, was also there. So you're not free from that, even though he has a passion and he also has a gift and talent in something that his father and the religious community, and the Christian religious community, would see as evil.
Mhm. Yeah, I think that I guess kind of the downer, now I'm becoming the downer, is that, the search for freedom in so many cases is that you have this fleeting moment of it.
Mhm.
And so they had it at their kind of juke location with the twins, and then you have Sammy with his music. He went on to continue, but this idea that you have to fight for it and perhaps it's fleeting, um, I think is very prevalent throughout the film. And that's interesting to me in terms of the vampire aspect, because vampires are immortal,
Mm.
uh, in theory. And so to have these things that you fight for that might not last
Mhm.
forever, but are worth fighting for.
Right. You know what? I didn't explain this, and I didn't really know about this, and I feel like we need to come back to the term juke, what it is, and the originations. And so, essentially, the origination of that word is a gullah, and if we've now talked about the Gullah Geechee culture much, but it's one of the indigenous groups that came, the Black community within like the coastal areas, Savannah, and South Carolina, all of those areas, which still very much exist, and their cultures very much have influenced the Southeast a lot. But it's actually originated from their word "jug" or "juke," and it has the meaning of like wicked or rowdy or disorderly. So essentially, this term is what it built into being a juke joint. And this is what the Mississippi Encyclopedia.org writes about it. The origins of the term juke or juke, Jook, remain uncertain. Some scholars, again, have speculated the word derives from the African word juga, meaning bad or wicked, while others believe juke comes from juice. Again, I've seen more people saying that it was a Gullah Geechee term. So back and forth, but it also describes early electric guitars and music players, or I guess it was also called juice boxes. That I didn't know. I know apparently very little about old music. And it really kind of popped up again during the 1930s with this conversation, juke joints, which we see as a reference from like writers like Zora Neale Hurston, who apparently wrote about it in 1934, but they were apparently appropriate previous spaces. So they weren't like something that they built up. They just kind of got there. And they're like, they set it up there, essentially. They're kind of like the mill. They set it up to be a juke joint. So there's a lot of like depth and soul, even in that word alone. And kind of a descriptor of what they were doing, having a wicked time in that music world.
Yes. Well, and I think the title's very good because when you're talking about sinners,
Mm-hmm.
for a lot of us, for a lot of people who grew up in the Western Christianity world, that means a specific thing. And I think that they did a really good job of exploring that idea of what the sin is.
Mm-hmm.
And I really, really, I know I said it earlier, but I really think that the setting looks to me like a church. It really does. And so and there's just a lot of things going on. There's like sex and there's sexual tension and there's drinking and there's, I guess, music that could be considered like rowdy. So I appreciated that they all of that. And then I really love that they have Anney come in and be respected, listened to, of, hey, no, here's what we're got to do.
Yeah.
This is what we need to do. And I don't know, there was just a part of me that I hadn't seen something so quick to be like, no, she's right. Let's just listen to her.
I love that sensibility. And she was authoritative. Like, not just like, I don't know, guys. But she was authoritative. She made this, I'm telling you, I loved her character, and she deserves all the awards. Interestingly, I wanted to go back real quick in this article about the juke joints, because I think this is really important in a historical context. So they say the malleability of juke joints developed out of subversive nature of early blues music itself. During slavery, African Americans were not permitted to gather. In some cases, dancing and singing also were not allowed. Despite these constraints, music played an important part for the community. As blues music gained popularity in the Jim Crow South, juke joints became safe spaces for African Americans to gather without white supervision. So that's that important context of like not allowing the white people in there. Like, you got your own thing. Let us have this. And it was subversive. It's kind of that level of like, again, a little bit of sinning, a little bit against the rules. Y'all won't let us do this, so let us have this. And the juke joints became a thing of rebellion, essentially, but also of celebration, obviously. And again, like in that level of like, if there was a versus in that level of like sin versus good, faith versus evil type of conversation, like we have to talk about the religious overtones in this conversation. Again, the overlapping of the different views at the time between Christianity, hoodoo, the indigenous beliefs. Like, he layered these conversations and beliefs. He had Anney over here, he had the father over here, and he even had the Choctaw Nation coming through here, in making sure that it was understood this time was chaos, especially for a community trying to establish home in an area that didn't feel safe, in a place, in a situation that wasn't comfortable. But this is what they could do because they weren't giving options. Like, there was no other choice. But again, with that comes the layer of adapting to where you are. So Christianity versus remembering some of the old ways, whether like, because we know the background of hoodoo does come from African culture and that level, and how it is a part of this. It's a religious spiritual belief that outside of what Christianity has made it look like. It's this conversation. And there's an article written in religiousnews.com about this movie and in this conversation. And they write this: Anney's function as a spiritual mediator invites the audience into a discourse on a Black spiritual understanding of protection, life, and death. This is shown in her confrontation with a vampire, her explanation of what a vampire is, and her plea to kill her if she is bitten so her soul can be reunited with her daughter. These scenes and others position hoodoo's ancestral framework as a lens that views death not as an end, but as a transitional state. As Sinners examines the porous boundaries between the sacred and the secular and entanglement of religion and Black identity, it offers a profound cultural contribution in this much-needed moment in the U.S. Sinners sets a new standard for horror genre and begins a new chapter within the history of Black horror films. Like, it does. It's this context. Like, I love that they wrote about this, because I know I've seen this discourse back and forth, and there's a lot of Black religious figures who like the movie and who see it as is. And then there's a lot of religious figures who are upset at some of this portrayal. That's the back and forth for sure. And this conversation in itself is such an important conversation and piece about culture, about where it stood. She did not see, hoodoo was not something that said this is evil. It was like, this is a transition. And I know that I need to be, well, she said vampires are evil, but let's go ahead with that. Yeah, she did say that. But the human experience and afterlife was seen as different. And also different from what people see as heaven, in that context as well. Although the belief of heaven is not as important as the belief of hell in this context of Christianity, I think. I mean, I'm going to put that there. But It was a great conversation piece in that, because there has to be, to me, especially as a person who is a Korean that came into the US into a very staunchly white Christian church that had a lot of set of rules, that also looking back on my own culture, that I remember some of the Buddhists' ancestral beliefs that was incorporated, because they also were Christian, but they were colonized Christians, as we know. So seeing those different aspects and trying to deal with that's like Christian trauma versus cultural understanding and understanding where Korean and East Asian and Asian cultures were and who they believed and how that changed throughout their history as well. Like, it's interesting to note, like, you have to try to balance those. Like, you need to figure out how to equally understand, I guess, without feeling guilt. Because there's this, when you're raised in one way, when you're raised in a colonized Christian atmosphere, colonized Christian beliefs, and that's what you banked your life on as a child, to growing into this and being like, wait, that doesn't make sense because culturally this is not where I was. You know, this was not my beginning. This is not my culture's beginning. So how did this overlap? And who is this benefiting? So it's this level of conversation that has to be had when you confront history, your culture versus the colonized state of today.
Yeah. There's so much to be said about this movie. It's amazing because that, you know, you could summarize it very simply as, oh, it's a kind of a timepiece with vampires in it. But it does have so much going on and so much that it's talking about in terms of race and class and women. And I do think it's interesting about the twins because you have the kind of two different ways that they interact with the world and the two different ways of what happens to them. So there's just a lot to be said. And I think that the fact that it's been so awarded, the fact that it was like one of the biggest things I saw at Dragon Con.
Yes. Halloween was beautiful. And, you know, before I forget, I'm missing the biggest context here. The usage of vampires as an allegory into this time frame.
Yes.
When we talk about colonization, when we talk about who is the bloodsucker, who is like taking and stealing from people, who is like masquerading as the good people versus, you know, like, I'll heal you, I'll do these things for you, come to mind. Like, if we talk about like missionaries in their context of like bringing religion to areas that didn't need it, like to steal culture. Like, we talk about vampires, like to steal other cultures, or like culture vultures, culture vampires. This is it. Like, I don't know how I'm bypassing that. There's so much to this. But yeah, that's the huge allegory in itself for this entirety of the horror portion.
Oh, absolutely. The whole blood-sucking part and the whole... you gotta invite me
I gotta take
in.
his music. I gotta take his music. I need his music.
Yes. Well, we had a lot to say about this. Obviously, we could keep going. We shall see what award season brings, but I think they're gonna get some awards. But listeners, if you have any thoughts, please let us know. You can email us at hello@stuffnevertoldyou.com. You can find us on Blue Sky at Mom Stuff Podcast, or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have some merchandise at Cotton Bureau if you would like some. And we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcast, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.